GTX 550 Ti from Nvidia was released in March of 2011. It boasted a massive 1GB of GDDR5 RAM. This was released as a mid-range card and was based on the 14nm Fermi architecture. This video was filmed in June 2021, where the GPU crisis was still going strong. With a worldwide shortage of chips and components coupled with crypto miners buying up most of the inventory that was released, it was a bad time for PC gamers who wanted to have the latest and greatest. So I thought it'd be a good time to have another look at this GPU and see if it's worth it as a stopgap solution. The test bench I'm using is an Intel i7-2600 with 32GB of DDR3 RAM. To explain my scoring rationale, with the exception of the Unigine benchmarks, I will be scoring the benchmarks and games by adding all the frame counts together and then times them by 10. This will allow me to rate the GPUs evenly across all benchmarks and games. In Unigine Heaven at 1080p with high settings, the minimum FPS is 4.4, there's a maximum of 23.9 and an average of 9.3. Reducing the settings still at 1080p, we see a minimum of 25.1, a maximum of 74.1 and an average of 47.6. Dropping down to 720 with high settings, there's a minimum of 8.6, a maximum of 44.3 and an average of 17.3. Reducing the settings at the same resolution sees a minimum of 36.6, a maximum of 135.2 and an average of 87.1. Moving on to Unigine Valley at 1080p with high settings, the minimum is 7.3, the maximum of 23.1 and the average was 12.5. Reducing the settings sees a minimum of 21.2, a maximum of 67.7 and an average of 36.3 FPS. Going to 720p with high settings, we see a minimum of 16.3, a maximum of 46.5, with the average coming in at 25.4. Again, reducing the settings at 720p, we get a minimum of 38.5 FPS, a maximum of 115.3, and the average is at 62.1. Looking at Unigine Superposition, 1080p high settings, with the minimum at 3.8, a maximum of 6.2, and an average of 4.7. It's more like a flipbook than a smooth animation. Reducing the settings can only improve this, and we see a minimum of 16.2, a maximum of 27.6 and an average of 21.1. Reducing the resolution to 720, we see a minimum of 11.3, maximum was 18.7 and an average of 14.7. Bringing the settings down helps once more, with the minimum being 22.2 FPS, the maximum was 42.3 and the average came in at 39.2. Just to note on the 1% and 0.1% lows, the Unigine benchmarks, the first two at least, don't have a good time with this, so superposition turned out to be okay though. Moving on to MSI Combustor and the firm arc test at 1080p, this sees a minimum of 15 FPS, a maximum of 15.7 FPS and an average of 15.5. Quite tight results there, even if the FPS were really low. Moving down to 720, we see a minimum of 29.1, maximum was 30.5 and an average of 30.2. Over to Testmark X32 at 1080p, we see some more poor frames per second. Minimum came in at 6.5, maximum was 6.9 and an average of 6.7. Reducing the resolution had no effect. Minimum was 6.6, maximum 6.9 and the average was 6.9. Let's hope the games have better results, starting with CSGO at 1080p with medium to high settings. We see a minimum of 23.6 FPS, the maximum was 356.7 and the average was 68.7. Keeping the same settings but at 720p, sees a minimum of 43.3 FPS, a maximum of 317.8 and an average of 91.1. So at least CSGO looks good to go on this GPU. Going over to Rocket League at 1080p, we see a minimum of 26.9, maximum of 95.8 and an average of 75.3. Same settings at 720, sees the minimums coming in at 56.9, the maximum was 166.8 and the average was 123.2. And lastly onto GTA 5 at a resolution of 1600 by 900 with medium to high settings. This card can cope with 1080p. So we see a minimum of 30.1, a maximum of 30.7 and an average of 30.3. Stable results, but it is a lower resolution. Going down to 720p, we see a minimum of 29.8, a maximum of 31.1 and an average of 30.4. So again, absolutely no benefit in reducing the screen size. And that's it. The GTX 550 could never be seen as a good card, especially with these benchmarks. But as a gaming platform, it's better than nothing. Not by much though. So if you own this card and are waiting for prices to come down, it may prove to be a good start. However, if you're one of the poor souls who sold their GPU and are now stuck without one, maybe stay away from this one as a stopgap. Maybe go for a 600 series card or better. Probably would work out better, but depends on the price. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. And if you did, toss me a like. And if you didn't, press the other button. Any comments, please leave them down below. And if you really want to, subscribe to me. See you next time.